Christians are directed to confess their faults one to another, and so to join in their prayers with and one for another. James 5 verse 16. Some expositors connect this with James 5:14. As if the sick people send for the ministers to pray over them, they should then confess their faults to them. Indeed, where any are conscious that their sickness is a vindictive punishment for some particular sin, and they cannot look for the removal of their sickness without peculiar applications to God for the pardon of such a sin, there it may be proper to acknowledge and tell his case, that those who pray over him may know how to plead rightly for him. But the confession here required is that of Christians to one another, and not, as the Papists would have it, to a priest. Where persons have injured one another, acts of injustice must be confessed to those against whom they have been committed. Where persons have tempted one another to sin, or have consented in the same evil actions, there they ought mutually to blame themselves and excite each other to repentancy. Where crimes are of a public nature, and have done any public mischief, there they ought to be more publicly confessed, so as may best reach to all who are concerned. And sometimes it may be well to confess your faults to some prudent minister or praying friend, that he may help us to plead with God for mercy and pardon. But then, we are not to think that James puts us upon telling everything that we are conscious is amiss in ourselves or in one another, but so far as confession is necessary to our reconciliation with such as are at variance with us, or for gaining information and any point of conscience and making our own spirits quiet and easy. So far, we should be ready to confess our faults. But sometimes, also, it may be of good use to Christians to disclose their particular weaknesses and infirmities to one another, where there are great intimacies and friendships, and where they may help each other by their prayers to obtain pardon of their sins and power against them. Those who make confessions of their faults one to another should thereupon pray with and for one another. The James 5:13 directs persons to pray for themselves. Is any afflicted? Let him pray. The James 5:14 directs to seek for the prayers of ministers, and the James 5:16 directs private Christians to pray one for another, so that here we have all sorts of prayer, ministerial, social, and secret, recommended. This ends John Gill's commentary on James chapter 5 verse 16, the first part of the verse. Now, that covers, quote, confess your faults one to another and pray one for another that you may be healed, unquote. Now let's look at the second part of the verse, quote, the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much, unquote. Continuing on with Matthew Henry's commentary. The great advantages and efficiency of prayer are declared and proved. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much, whether he pray for himself or for others. Witness the example of the last verses, verse 17 and 18. He who prays must be a righteous man, not righteous in an absolute sense, for this Elias was not who is here made a pattern to us, but righteous in a gospel sense, not loving nor approving of any iniquity. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear my prayer. Psalm 66:18. Further, the prayer itself must be a fervent, inwrought, well-wrought prayer. It must be a pouring out of the heart to God, and it must proceed with a faith unfringed. Such prayer avails much. It is of great advantage to ourselves. It may be very beneficial to our friends, and we are assured of its being acceptable to God. It is good having those for friends whose prayers are available in the sight of God. The power of prayer is here proved from the success of Elijah. This may be encouraging to us even in common cases, if we consider that Elijah was a man of like passions with us. He was a zealous good man, and a very good man, but he had infirmities, and was subject to disorder in his passions as well as others. In prayer, we must not look to the merit of man, but to the grace of God. Only in this should we copy after Elijah, that he prayed earnestly, or as it is in the original, in prayer he prayed. It is not enough to say a prayer, but we must pray in prayer. Our thoughts must be fixed, our desires firm and ardent, and our graces in exercise. And when we thus pray in prayer, we should speed in prayer. Elijah prayed that it might not rain, and God heard him in his pleading against idolatrous, persecuting country, so that it rained not on the earth for the space of 3 years and 6 months. Again he prayed, and the heavens gave rain, etc. Thus you see, prayer is the key which opens and shuts heaven. To this there is an allusion. Revelations 11:6, where the two witnesses are said to have power to shut heaven, that it rain not. The instances of the extraordinary efficiency of prayer is recorded for encouragement even to ordinary Christians to be instant and earnest in prayer. God never says to any of the seed of Jacob, "Seek my face in vain." If Elijah by prayer could do such great and wonderful things, surely the prayers of no righteous man shall return void. Where there may not be so much of a miracle in God's answering our prayers, yet there may be as much of grace.